Welcome to Chat with the Lawyer. I'm your host, Walla Blagay, and we are honored to have a celebrity on our show, Judge Alexander Williams, former U.S. District Court judge, also the first Black state's attorney in Prince George's County. He's coming here to talk about a very important issue, juvenile justice. As we know, this is an issue that plagues our communities. He's going to talk about ways to address it, including reentry programs, ways that communities can look into this issue, and also give us his insight as a former U.S. District Court judge. Welcome.
Thank you, Walla. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for coming on the show. Now, could you go run us through your history as a lawyer? It's very impressive.
Well, Walla, I'm very privileged to have been one of the first African-American attorneys in the county. I was here in the mid-'70s, practiced law for a while and taught law also at Howard Law School. But more important than that, I got an opportunity back in 1986 to run against the incumbent state's attorney, and fortunately I was able to get citizens around the county to elect me, and I became the state's attorney for the county. Right after that, after serving 2 terms, I then was nominated by President Bill Clinton to serve on the federal bench, and I just retired a couple years ago as a United States District Court judge.
That's interesting. Now, let me ask you, not to divert to a different issue, but what was it at the time being one of the first African-American attorneys in Prince George's County?
Well, Walla, it was a challenge. It was only 3 or 4 of us at the time, and you had a very aggressive Black community that was growing, and they wanted the political and economic power. And the bench was pretty much all white at the time, and so it was something to have clients being represented by Black lawyers and arguing cases in Prince George's County, which was just a tough, difficult jurisdiction to crack. But I enjoyed the challenge, and people assisted me, and here I am after so many years of having retired.
You've done an amazing job. Well, let's go, tell me a little bit about your nonprofit. Now, you have a nonprofit that you've created to address many of the issues that impact the communities.
Yeah, I've invested a lot of time in Prince George's County. I've been a resident since 1973. And while on the bench, I came up with this idea that I didn't want to stay for life. I had a lifetime appointment as a federal judge, but I wanted to give back to the community. And so about a year before I left, I created the Judge Alexander Williams Center for Education, Justice, and Ethics. And that picked up all of my experience in both education, as a teacher, in criminal justice as a litigator, and also, as you know, while I have a couple degrees in religion and ethics. So this center was designed to address many of the critical challenges and issues that underserved communities and disadvantaged communities have in this county. So I formed a 501c3 and I got my tax-exempt status, and fortunately the University of Maryland heard about it, and they asked me to join their College of Behavior and Social Sciences. So I'm on campus now, and I'm just trying to make this thing work here in Prince George's County.
I'm a graduate of that school, actually. Well, let's go into this. Now, juvenile justice is such an important issue right now. Look at the Black Lives Matter movement. People are saying Black men are being killed everywhere. Then we get it where that it's being, there's been a target of African-American young men going through the justice system. And it seems like it's a path, they say like a prison pipeline, right? So where do we begin?
Well, I think we have to recognize that the same issues that you hear in the United States now about too many people incarcerated also affect juvenile justice. We have too many young people who are being thrown into prisons and detention centers, and they're not warranted in terms of being there. Many of these young people have drug issues, some of them have mental issues, and they have dysfunctional families that were not as supportive as we would like. And then you're throwing them into the adult system simply because they've allegedly perpetrated a number of violent offenses. And it's a real challenge because you can't throw and put young people in adult prisons. And you've got to think about that and try to redirect energies and programs back to young people. So the same problem in adult situations happens with young people. There are too many that are being locked up right now and detained, and we've got to address that.
And let me ask you something. You were a judge before, so these cases came to your chambers, am I right?
I didn't have a whole lot in the federal system of young people, except that we did get occasionally some under 18 who were charged with adult offenses. I think that's more in the state system where the statute provides that anyone 14 and over who has committed things like murder and armed robbery, kidnapping, and those kind of things can be prosecuted as adults. And that's a problem right there where they have original jurisdiction in adult court. And what has bothered me over the years is that many prosecutors have not taken into consideration that many of these young people lack judgment, they're not mature, and yet you're charging them as adults, and then you have these waiver policies where you waive them from juvenile court up to the adult court. And we've got to address these issues with our prosecutors so they can utilize their discretion better.
And let me ask you, because I know there was a recent Supreme Court decision that says juveniles can't go to death penalty, right?
Yeah, that was a case called Powell versus Miller versus Alabama. Okay. And that case basically held that it is a ban under cruel and unusual punishment to give persons under 18 life without parole. Right. And that case now has wonderful implications around the country, and many states, including Maryland, are now re-examining all of those sentences of people under 18 who got life without parole. And that's just unfair, because there is a difference, as I see it, between sentencing juveniles as opposed to sentencing adults. And again, juveniles just have not had the maturity that is necessary to make judgments in terms of criminal acts.
Now let me ask you, because is there a legislative fix to ensure that young juveniles aren't charged adult sentences and going through or allowed to be incarcerated with adults?
Yeah, they haven't gone that far yet. All states have what they call mandatory adult charges for people as to certain offenses, even though they're under 18. For example, in the state of Maryland, if you pull out a gun and you rob someone, even at 16, you'll be charged with robbery with a deadly weapon, and you'll go immediately to adult court. And that's the same thing for more serious offenses like murder and so forth. So most states still have that, I call it the original vesting of jurisdiction in the adult court, even though there is authority to waive back, and judges do have the authority to entertain a request to waive back, particularly when you've got someone without a record.
And is there so the judge has complete discretion to say this person doesn't have to serve this adult sentence?
Yes. Judges have some factors they have to look at, whether children, based on their age, maturity, or whether they are amenable to correction and treatment. They do have some discretion to waive it back and keep them in the juvenile court. And as you know, Walla, there's a big distinction between juvenile court and adult court. Because in the juvenile court, if you're prosecuted and dealt with there, you can be detained no longer than 21 years, up to your 21st birthday. But in adult court, of course, you can be sentenced for life once you get in that system. So it is somewhat unfair, and we've got to continue to look at policies to address the overall problem with juvenile delinquency.
Now, let's talk about mandatory minimum sentencing, because I know a lot of people say, especially in the 90s, that brought a lot of young juveniles into the criminal system. What is your take on that? Because you were a judge at that time, right?
Again, there's too many, I call it passionate reaction by politicians to make sure that they were tough on crime. And so all around the country, not just in Congress, but all the state legislatures, they passed all these legislations, 3 strikes and you're out. And
that was Bill Clinton, wasn't it?
That's right, and mandatory minimums, which meant that you took the power away from judges and put it in the hands of prosecutors, because once you charge them with these offenses, there's nothing the judge can do. The judge could not take into consideration the age, maturity, no record. Again, if you've committed a certain crime and the statute says mandatory minimum, then our hands were tied, and we ended up having to sentence people to 20 years, 15 years, and so forth. And many of them dealt with drug offenses, which was basically the reason why so many of our African American people were incarcerated because of the crack epidemic and so forth.
And can you explain that? Because a lot of people don't understand why that mandatory minimum had an impact on African Americans and it didn't have an impact on like the white youth as much.
Yeah, and we'll just use one example. The drug choice of whites was cocaine powder, whereas the drug choice of young African American males was crack. And the reason for that is that some of the African Americans were stretching the crack and cooking it so that they could get a profit out of it. And what happened after the Lynn Bias tragedy at the University of Maryland, there was this hue and cry against crack, which was unjustified. Crack's no worse than powder. But crack, again, was something that the community was frightened by law enforcement calls. They had crack babies, crack houses, and all this passion calls for a tough mandatory sentences on crack. And since crack was a choice that a lot of young African males dealt with, then all of the tough sentencing went for crack as opposed to cocaine. And in fact, in the federal system at one time, there was 100-to-1 discrepancy between the amount of cocaine that you had versus the amount of crack. In other words, you needed 100 times more cocaine, powder cocaine, to get the same sentence as someone would get for crack. So that was the problem that you had around the country, and it's been somewhat corrected because of the cries of Congress people and other community activists.
Interesting. Now, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about how do we begin to fix some of these solutions. We haven't even, there's so many problems. We could sit here for 3-4 hours talking about them, but we're going to talk about the beginning of discussing what are the solutions. Please stay with us. Thank you.
After 1 or 2 drinks, my boyfriend can't stop drinking until he drinks too much. It scares me, but I don't have the money to see a counselor or a therapist about it right now. The more I think about my boyfriend's drinking, the more depressed I get. He's charming, handsome, and smart in so many ways, but when he drinks, I don't even know him. A friend of mine suggested I try Al-Anon family groups. She said it doesn't cost anything. There are no dues or fees for Al-Anon. Donations are completely voluntary. At first, I was afraid to go to Al-Anon. I felt like a fool to care about somebody who can't stop drinking. Al-Anon helps a lot. The members know how I feel and what it's like to love somebody who's totally out of control. If someone's drinking troubling you, you might be surprised at what you can learn at an Al-Anon family group from people just like you. Call 1-888-4-AL-ANON or go to alanon.org.
The following is a public service announcement test to determine if you need a fishing license and boat registration before you head out on the water. Let us begin. Are you a pelican? Does this look like your house? Is this your idea of fishing with friends? Do you use your feet as fishing hooks? Are you your own boat? Do you have webbed feet? No, I mean like a... That's the one. Do you want this in your favorite lake? Yuck, yike. No thanks, mister. Regardless how you answered, you need to be licensed and registered because it helps local conservation efforts protect the very natural resources you enjoy boating and fishing in for generations to come. Do your part at takemefishing.org.
Welcome back to Chat with the Lawyer. I'm your host, Walla Blagay, and I'm here with Judge Williams, and we're talking about a very important topic, juvenile justice. And we were going to go back into what can we do to address the juvenile justice issue. So what are some of the options? What are some of the things that you're considering after your years of practice?
Yeah, well, Walla, again, I'm part of the community, and the issue of juvenile justice is critical because we want our young people to have a decent shot so that when they are our ages, they'll be responsible professionals and so forth. Right. And we have to recognize that many of them suffer from drug abuse. Some of them have mental issues, right. Just the way adults right. and challenges, and then some have dysfunctional families and so forth. And my thinking is that instead of incarcerating all of them all the time, and instead of treating them punitively as criminal matters, that perhaps we need to re-examine and revisit the overall process of a family court that will look at all of the issues that make up the challenges for juveniles. For example, we have the Department of Social Services for the state, as well as the Department of Juvenile Services. Social service comes into play when children have problems at home. They've got to look at foster parents and other issues associated with the family breakup, whereas juvenile services deal with delinquent acts. And what we need to do is to bring all of these stakeholders to the table so that we can talk about a comprehensive program that will address all of the issues that children have. There is this whole idea of the schoolyard as a pipeline to the jail. Yep. And we've got to correct that now. And here in Prince George's County, there is a crossover program where they're meeting from time to time with a group of folks from social services, from juvenile services, from the court, the juvenile court, also the attorney for the parents, the attorney for the child, and prosecutors are all meeting to see what is the best approach and program for this child. But it's a very serious issue. It requires good strategies from everyone involved, including prosecutors.
So how would you, okay, so we have a family court. So because they already have like a family court. I think Judge Charette is one of those.
Yes.
That, so they have one in Prince George where people go with family issues, I guess divorce or custody issues. But then if we have this type of family court that's more juvenile, to help juveniles, how do you imagine, what's the process?
You've got to put all of the stakeholders together, including the legislators and policy makers and people from the health department and schools and psychologists. And so everyone has to come together and have a handle in this because a child is unique. They're not an adult. And we have to reach the needs of the children as early on as they can so that we can divert that path that leads again from the schools or jail to prison and so forth.
So what you're envisioning is that a court that somebody would go before, and then there will be a psychologist around and a social service rep around to just sort of grab them in different directions as they're going through the process.
While we call it a court, but it's really a program. I don't want to create the impression that we're talking about going into a courtroom and talking about a sentence and so forth. There's so many other needs that have to take place. So whatever you call it, whether it's a family center or as Prince George's County is getting ready to open up a family justice center.
And what is that family justice center?
A family justice center is a place, as I believe it, where families can go to get information on the court process and and help and assistance when they have family challenges, they have money problems, they have housing problems, and it's an all-encompassing entity where you go and get questions answered and get help. And I don't think we have a comprehensive program in place yet. So that's what the county is trying to put in place with a family justice center.
Now, let me tell you, now, one of the things that I've heard from many people who are involved with the community is that it's a parent's problem. You know, parents aren't involved with their kids, so sometimes the kid isn't going to go walk into the family court alone. They kind of need the parent to push them to do it. And a lot of times, a lot of people feel that the kids that go through the justice process are lacking parental guidance, which is why they end up there. So how do you get the parents involved?
Well, that's part of it. The problems with parental supervision and assistance is some families are just dysfunctional. But it's also an issue of schools. The schools often do not have programs to educate all of its students and so forth. Some fall through the crack, and once you get disinterested in school or you're not doing well, then you're prone to what's out here in the community and so forth. So part of it is parental help, some of it's school, and then some of it is just poverty. People living in certain environments where you don't have a breakfast, you don't know where your meal is coming from, you're homeless, and there's just a number of problems that contribute to delinquency. So all of it has to be addressed, as I said, in a comprehensive fashion so that we can cut down on, I think, detention and incarceration of young people.
Now, when you were a prosecutor, how did you handle, let's just say, these juveniles that came from poor home households? Like when you saw that as a prosecutor? Well,
let me be perfectly honest. I could have done more, back then, but I gave a lot of discretion to my attorneys to ask them to take into consideration all of these factors when they were charging and when they were making decisions on whether to waive them up to up to adult court, or wave them down from adult court down to juvenile court. So I thought sensitive, compassionate prosecutors in place who would take all of this in consideration when they were trying to come up with some disposition for children. So it was a challenge, and now that I think about it, I could have done more, but we had so many young people who were in our court that were charged with some of the most heinous offenses like murder, like sex offenses. I mean, we had children having sex with each other, with their family and siblings and that kind of thing. And some of it obviously they were disturbed and with health issues and mental issues, but those are the kind of issues that found their way into the juvenile court. And some of them just did not really know what they were doing. And in fact, I'll mention this, that a lot of the defense attorneys now in Prince George's County are filing what they call incompetency defenses, meaning that the children are unable to appreciate the nature of the proceedings and can assist the attorneys in their defenses. But there's some serious things that's going on in juvenile court. If you sat there and watched it, you'd be just amazed and shocked at some of the things that our children are involved in.
And so in that case, if you have a sibling to sibling sexual assault of some sort, are you all referring, is there a referral to social services? Is that, like, how is that, do they fall through that justice system?
Correct? Yeah, we do have social services that comes into play. We do have juvenile services that works together, and that's not a case where you want to incarcerate them or detain them. It's a situation where they need to have counseling, they need to be removed from the home and placed in foster parents with sufficient supervision, to address that problem.
Interesting. Now let's talk about reentry. Like, so a lot of people get out of the justice system, and then there's nothing for them, so they end up back in the justice system. And what can be done about that?
Yeah, I have a big interest in that, and that's one of the reasons that I formed my nonprofit, the Judge Alexander Williams Center. We already had one conference on reentries. I had it at the University of Baltimore School of Law, and we're going to have a program and focus at the University of Maryland College Park. And what we're trying to do is to bring all of the stakeholders involved in this process, potential employers, probation officers, even the recent entry people should be able to come out and tell us what are the challenges that you're facing to reintegrate back into society. And we know pretty much what they are. Many of them are not able to get an adequate employment a job to take care of their families. And in fact, talking about family court, some of them have these child support orders that they can't really comply with, and they end up back in court because they can't pay and they don't have a job. And then there's so many rules and statutes against them. I call it the collateral consequences of having a record. And in Maryland.
And how, can you explain that? What is the so what is there's child support? Are they allowed, if someone just comes out of jail, are they allowed to garnish their checks?
Well, what check? You know, if they have, you know, again, if they have the means, that's fine. But most of them don't have a check.
Right.
You know,
right.
So, but the order continues on and it's got to be addressed. But when I was talking about the collateral consequences again, I'm talking about all the legislation and barriers to coming back. Some, you know, they can't vote. You know, certain jobs they can't get.
Right. They can't even get government jobs.
That's right. That's
all
right.
out of
Certain places they can't even live in because we got restrictions. And in Maryland, there are hundreds and hundreds of barriers that are imposed upon returning citizens, and it's got to be stopped. And I hope that my center will be able to look into those things and make some recommendations to the legislators as to what they need to abolish and address.
Right, right. Now, what about the job pipeline? And now you said your nonprofit was focused on that. Are you all reaching out to employers to see if they would hire some people? Yes.
So first of all, obviously, we can understand that those who have been convicted of theft or embezzlement, obviously they can't work at a bank. I mean, we understand that. I mean, that's clear. But there are a number of other jobs that they can do, and there's no reason why the Marriotts of the world and the Johns Hopkins and other hospitals and other places can't bring in and train individuals to get vocation and licenses and so forth. And so our focus at the University of Maryland in this program on reentry is to bring some of these potential employers in and ask them to take a chance on reentry people so that they can be responsible citizens returning back to the community.
That's good. Well, we're going to have to cut this short because we have to end the program. But if somebody wants to contact you, they have ideas, they are like looking into this juvenile justice issue, how do they contact you?
Yeah, we have a website. It's called the Judge Alexander Williams Center for Education, Justice, and Ethics, and it's affiliated with the University of Maryland at College Park. And all the information as to what our focus is and how to get in contact with us is certainly there.
All right, so they can look that up and
Yes.
find you? Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for coming on our show, for giving us great information. To hear from someone would have such a wealth of information, and thank you for your service.
And it's my pleasure.
All right, and if you want to get more episodes, if you want to contact a lawyer, you can contact us at www.chatwithalawyer.tv. Thank you, and stay tuned.
We have this crazy thing going on today. I was just walking by and all these DJs and producers are set up all around the city.
I just walked by and I said, "What's happening, guys?" And they told me they were making music.
It's the way you walk, it's the way you talk.
There were a lot of people that claimed they had no musical talent and then sat down and kind of made some really nice sounds.
I like this music.
out today, inspired musically about life.
They said I could play, so any chance to play at all, you know, that's my life. I love music.
Yeah, that's how we do it.